I will skip this example, and I will only mention that there is some evidence showing that these effects really take place within science. And we are currently doing a research project on looking at these effects in the community of neuroscientists. And the idea is to anticipate or to look at how scientists perceive the public image of their research in the mass media. And we think that positive and negative accounts of the research is a kind of feedback to them. And if they get some positive feedback, they are inclined to go more in that direction. If they get some negative feedback, we think they may avoid that kind of research. And here we have a graph from our INVEDI study. We ask about kinds of decisions that have been influenced by the expected media resonance of that research. For example, chosen or avoided particular research questions, chosen or avoided certain research methods, and so on and so forth. And the result was, we didn't ask, did you yourself have that factor influence your decision? We asked about, do you know that colleagues modified their decision because of expected media resonance? Because we didn't really have the courage to ask them about their own behavior. But it was no problem asking that question, by the way. So next time we will do it in a more direct way. But 2/3 of the scientists in all countries we analyzed simply said, well, yes to one of these aspects. Considering media resonance as a factor in making decisions in the research process seems to be quite common in the biomedical field. This is a biomedical field. And we are now, with this new project, trying to look in more detail which kind of context does that happen. Maybe sometimes it's only cosmetics and not substantial, and so on. But the main idea of this medialization project we are doing is you must not necessarily consider it a bad thing that media resonance is considered in making decisions about research. You can consider it as a kind of governance based on public values, because journalism has to look for public values, is oriented at public values. And so in a way, these constructs science journalism produces about neuroscientific research, for example, reflect public values. And if these media images then influence research, it is more or less giving the public some influence on the direction of research. You could see it as a very positive, democratic thing. And we will try to look about the effects and whether the restriction of autonomy is more important or this democratic governance thing is more important. Okay, I will finish with this last idea, giving up something. Okay, perhaps we can have it in the discussion. Looking at the societal functions of science journalism, and I've shown you this model, and I think this model can be used to generate research questions for research on science journalism. And you could, for example, study these public constructs of science, technology, risk, etc., and study how journalism, or how in these constructs science is contextualized in non-scientific contexts. That means, for example, research on climate change becomes an argument in the political debate about how to fight climate change. You can look at framing. You remember this picture of GM food, that's framing. That means providing general pictures of whether it is good or not good. You could look into the integration of knowledge, as we have started to do. That is perhaps best done by kinds of content analysis, simply looking at the media coverage and trying to figure out what happens to scientific knowledge, to references to science within that coverage. The next thing you can study is to analyze how these constructs are constructed. So how does journalism or other providers of those constructs work. And you can look at the science media interface, as we have done. You can look at strategies of sources of science, but also of other sources. And I mean these public images of science, technology, risk, and so on. They are not only produced by looking at science. They are also produced by looking at Greenpeace, by NGOs, on NGOs, on political actors, and so on and so forth. So this is a combined effect of different sources that are used by journalists, science journalists. You can look the practice of science journalism, so the everyday behavior of science journalism. How do they find their information? Which kind of inquiry strategies do they apply? What place has the internet in the inquiry of science journalists, and so on and so forth? How well do they anticipate? I mean, this is a very interesting and not that well studied research problem. How well do science journalists anticipate the criteria of audience relevance and what their audience interests? I mean, they all have some idea of what would be of interest to the audience, but is it an accurate anticipation, or is it a biased anticipation? Selection of sources, something to study, and so on. And finally, you could look at effects, for example, on opinion forming of the general public. You could look at effects in the political, societal level. We talked about that before. Very difficult to analyze, but a lot to gain by looking at that. And you could look at governance effects by analyzing the repercussions of science journalism on science that is covered. Okay, I would say let's stop here. I'm not finished, but I think at least something to discuss, and perhaps I can mention one or the other thing in the discussion part of this lesson. Thank you.